In this video, we're going to do a rear brake caliper in this 2008 Acura MDX. All right, to remove the wheel, we're going to use a 22mm socket on an impact. All right, if your wheel happens to be stuck on the hub, what you can do is hit it to free it up. If you do that, you want to leave one lug nut on there, at least a few threads, to stop it from coming off. So ours is free. We'll remove that. And then the wheel. We're going to remove our caliper. We're going to do that with these two 12mm bolts. All right, so now our bolts are free. We should be able to move our caliper. This caliper is actually seized, so it's not going to come out easy. So we're just going to use a pry bar and work our caliper out evenly top and bottom. And just keep a hand on there for when it pops free. You don't want to do any damage to your brake line. Now that that's free, we'll go ahead and hang our caliper out of the way. All right, so now we can remove our pads. These will come out fairly easy. Just rotate them out. Same thing on the front. All right, so with a 17mm socket, we're going to take out our caliper bracket now, these two bolts. We'll start on the bottom. And before I take that one all the way out, I like to loosen the top one. And now we can remove our caliper bracket. All right, so here's our new caliper. Comes assembled with the bracket attached. What we need to do is remove these two bolts from our caliper. They're going to be a 14mm socket. Now we can separate our caliper from our caliper bracket, and we can install the metal hardware into our caliper bracket now. All right, so we're going to apply some grease here, fit our hardware into here. We're also going to address our caliper pins here. We're going to pull them out. You can see there's a little bit of grease on the pins. What we're going to do is remove the boot, put the boot back in place. And we're going to take a little bit of brake grease, just a little bit, not a lot. Put a thin coat across our caliper pin. This might be a little much, so I'm going to spread it across two pins. Just a little dab on the bottom. What you want to do is come up to that inner line. And we can seat this back in. And we're going to push all the way in, making sure that that rubber boot seats on the pin. And what we'll do is take a rag and just wipe off any excess. And we'll compress the pin all the way. Pull it out all the way, compress it all the way, and then wipe off any excess one last time. And move on to the other side. All right, now what we can do is in the slots where our hardware is going to go, put just a little bit of grease in there. I'm just going to spread a little bit across a few areas. Then we'll come back and even it out. What this is going to do is help a little bit with vibration, but more so with oxidation and corrosion around your hardware. And before we finish, we will come back with a rag and clean up in the middle here where our rotor will go. And we can put our new hardware in place, press it into place. Sometimes you'll squeeze a little bit out in the center. We'll just clean that up again. You just don't want any grease on your rotor itself. And the other side. There is one little side note. You do have washers in where your caliper brackets go on the inside. You just want to make sure that they are there and or in place correctly. So we can go ahead and put our caliper bracket in place. All right, now again with our 17mm ratchet, tighten these down. I'm just going to snug them up, then we'll come back and torque them down. All right, now we can torque these down to 101 foot-pounds. All right, so now we can install our pads. We're just going to sit the bottom into the groove and slide the top into place. Do the same thing on the outside. We are putting our wear indicator on the inside. All right, just squeeze them together. Now what we're going to do is take our old caliper and swap over the brake hose to our new caliper. This is the point where you definitely want to have some kind of spill protection or drip pan or rag down. You will experience a little bit of fluid coming out of your brake hose. All right, so there's two different ways to do this. We're going to opt for the second way. What we're actually going to do is take our pads off, because this caliper is seized, so we cannot compress the piston. We're going to put our caliper in place, thread in our caliper bolts, and now with a 14mm socket we can put a little leverage on this bolt and back out our brake hose. Now what you're going to have is your banjo bolt, your brake line, and two crush washers, one on each side. We'll have those ready in our new caliper. So what we'll do is we'll back out our bolt. We'll have to extract our old crush washer from our bolt. You can discard that. You should never reuse crush washers. If you don't have new ones, you should locate some new ones. So we'll install our new crush washer. Then our brake hose. Which might need just a little persuasion to come off of the old caliper. Shouldn't take much, but it's been on there a while. Just be delicate while you do this. Make sure the old crush washer isn't on your banjo. So put the bolt through, and then our new crush washer with our new caliper in hand, we can now thread it in place. If you can finger tighten it enough where it'll stop leaking, then you can go ahead and set your new caliper out of the way. Remove your old caliper now, your bolts. All right, so now we can reinstall our pads. We're going to put the brake squeal indication in the back. And the front. Squeeze them together. Now what we can do is take our new caliper and put it into position. And you'll notice on your caliper pins there's a flat side and a rounded side. It should match up to the flat side on your actual caliper itself. That'll stop that from rotating as you tighten these bolts. So just make sure they're both lined up. And we will thread in our new caliper bolts here by hand to start. And we will just snug those up. All right, we'll come back and torque these down. All right, we'll torque these down to 53 foot-pounds. All right, so as we're torquing this down, you can see that the caliper pin bracket here is spinning. So we're just going to back that up with a 19 millimeter. All right, and our banjo bolt brake line here is going to be torqued down to 25 foot-pounds. All right, so now that we've installed our brake line and our caliper, our new pads, we're going to bleed the brakes. So we're going to pull this rubber cap off of our bleeder screw. All right, so now what we're going to do, we got the rubber boot off. We're going to pump the brakes 3 or 4 times all the way to the floor. All right, so we've pumped the brakes 3 or 4 times. Now we can open our bleeder. What we're going to look for is just a continuous flow of fluid, no air bubbles, no breaks in the flow. Once we get that, we'll close it back up. All right, looks pretty good. We'll close it back up. Put the cap back on. And then one last step that I like to do is hit it with some brake clean. All the areas where you had and we're dealing with fluid. And then when this dries, if you see any wetness around these areas, you'll know you have a leak and you have to go back and tighten them back up. At this point, you want to go under your hood, make sure your brake fluid reservoir is full. If you need some, go ahead and top it back off. All right, we can go ahead and put our wheel back on. All right, at this point, I just like to rock the wheel. One side, get that snugged up. Rock the wheel another side, opposite, get that snugged up. And just do that until they're all pretty well snug. And we'll come back and torque them to spec. All right, now we're going to torque our lug nuts down to 94 foot-pounds. We're going to do that in a star pattern. We can start now. here.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.